The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection, came forward and put this question to Jesus, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us, if someone's brother dies, leaving a wife but no child, his brother must take the wife and raise up descendants for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married a woman, but died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and likewise all the 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. Now at the resurrection, whose wife will that woman be? For all 7 had been married to her." Jesus said to them, "The children of this age marry and remarry. But those who are deemed worthy to attain to the coming age and to the resurrection of the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. They can no longer die, for they are like angels, and they are the children of God because they are the ones who will rise. That the dead will rise, even Moses made known in the passage about the bush, when he called out, 'Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' For he is not God of the dead, but of the living. For to him all are alive." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so who wants to do something with that? Someone explain that, please? Let's get to work here. I have to admit, when you look at the first reading today from the second book of Maccabees and the selection from Luke's Gospel, they don't really seem to have a whole lot in common, except they both involve 7 brothers, and that's about it. The one tells the story about 7 brothers and their mother, although we get an abridged version, we only hear a couple of the brothers, who suffer and die because of their faith, and the other is a made-up story posed by Sadducees in an attempt to make fun of the resurrection about 7 brothers. And while at first glance, they don't look like they have a whole lot in common, at the heart of both of those readings is the question of the notion of resurrection. What do you think of it? What do you believe about it, even if you believe in it at all? So in 2 Maccabees, about 200 BC, there was a persecution that broke out against the Jewish people. And as you heard, the overlords were trying to make them eat pork. And the story of the 7 sons and their mother was meant to help inspire people to be heroic in keeping their faith. As they were tortured, as they were killed one by one, each of them made a great profession of faith as they died. The mother was finally the last to die after watching all her sons pass. And as she died, or as she spoke to her sons as they were dying, she said, "The Creator of the world, who shaped the beginning of man and devised the origin of all things, will in his mercy give life and breath back to you again." Very eloquent, very eloquent. "Will give life and breath back to you again." As I mentioned, that was around 200 BC, and it was right about that same time that the idea of an afterlife and the idea of personal resurrection was just beginning to appear in Jewish thought, although it was by no means universally accepted. And you see that because hundreds of years later, the Sadducees still don't accept the notion of resurrection. The Sadducees were a leading religious sect. They were mostly aristocrats. And their belief was that when you died, everybody went to the shadowy world of Sheol, and that was it. That's where you ended up. Of course, that allowed you as an aristocrat to enjoy your very wealthy life at the expense of others without worrying about anything happening to you once you had died, since you all went to the same place. But in particular, the Sadducees believed only in the first 5 books of the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, which they believed were written by Moses. And they saw nothing in those first 5 books to support the idea of resurrection. What they did know was that Moses had given them a law about how if a brother died without his wife having children, then the next brother was to marry the wife and try to have children, because for them, the only way of living forever, the only immortality you could have, was if your family's name continued. And so they used that law to try to point out how goofy the idea of resurrection is. See, the problem for the Sadducees, I think, is simply this. It's not that they really don't find resurrection in the first 5 books, although that may be the case. But even more so, they do not understand what resurrection is when Jesus speaks of it. They don't grasp what it is. Apparently for them, their notion of resurrection was that life was sort of extended or continued on with the same conditions applying that apply here on earth. And so the question of whose husband, whose wife is she? Because she'd been married to everybody, all 7 brothers. And Jesus takes the moment to try to blow open their mind to a new understanding that in this age, people marry and remarry, but not in the next. That the next age is very, very different. And I think the Sadducee notion of resurrection is worth sitting with for a moment, because it's a notion that I think very much is present in the world today. And that is, people are open to the idea of immortality, of life going on somehow forever. But resurrection is so much more than just that. Anecdotally, years ago, I want to say maybe 8 years ago, at a Christmas Eve children's mass, I was doing the homily. And I did what I always do. I gathered the children in front of me and sat down on the steps. And the point of the homily was for them to understand that just as when a new baby comes into their family and everything changes in the house and everything changes in their life, so when Jesus comes as a new baby, everything in the world changes. That Jesus coming changes everything. And I was bringing the homily in for a landing and was saying to the kids, so the birth of Jesus changes everything. And one little kid in the back said, yes, it even changes what happens to us after we die. I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody's got insight. Let's pull this thing back up and go with it. I said, you're so right on. How is it that things change for us because of Jesus after we die? And another kid shot his hand up. I said, yes, what's the difference? He goes, we all become zombies. Merry Christmas. But an openness to immortality, to life going on somehow. The zombies are very, very popular right now. Vampires were a few years ago. I mean, in every culture has its stories about ghosts and people appearing usually after midnight in the fog. I mean, you have the Headless Horseman, Washington Irving's running through Sleepy Hollow still. Hamlet's father returns to tell him about, how he had died. Matter of fact, a few years back, I want to say maybe 12, 15 years ago, it stuck with me because you'll understand why in a moment. It was a survey that revealed more than a third of Americans believe in ghosts. And there are many who have said they've actually had experiences of ghosts. And of those who said they've actually had lived experience of ghosts, they fell into 3 categories. They were either single, did not attend religious services, or were Catholic. Maybe we're just more open to possibilities in the world, I don't know. But this sense of an openness in the culture to life going on, whether it's another faith that says you are reincarnated, whether it's another faith that says your energy rejoins the earth and continues there, whatever that may be, this openness to immortality, to life continuing. But resurrection is more than just that. Resurrection is more than just that. Jesus, when he was risen from the dead, was not some sort of glowy specter a la Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars passing through walls. He became something new that had never been under the sun before. And suddenly, the cosmos was filled with him in a completely new way. There's a theologian named Walter Brueggemann who, in a book he wrote called Reverberations of the Faith, warns us not to trivialize the resurrection into nothing more than good feelings about seeing our faithful departed again, as beautiful as that is, but to recognize that a biblical sense of resurrection speaks to us of God's indomitable faithfulness and victory in his love over not just death, but over everything that would do harm to his creation. Everything that would do harm to his creation. Indeed, it was the resurrection that really gave the early Christians their sense of who they were. That was the defining understanding and characteristic for them, was that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, salvation had come about. And that resurrection was the apex upon their thought, the apex of what God was doing to take care of everything that would harm human beings. We believe that Christ is risen from death, and that one day, because of him, we too will share in that. And that gives us a message that cannot go unheard. Pope Paul VI, when he wrote his document on evangelization in the modern world, he says that salvation, won first by resurrection, is not just an otherworldly experience, but it's a this-worldly experience. That just like so many of God's good gifts, resurrection is not relegated to some future date in some future place at some future time that we hope for. But resurrection is at the heart of who we are right now in this moment. And that it's the power of the resurrection that animates and makes us effective in the world. If resurrection is about God's indomitable faithfulness and victorious love in the face of everything that would harm his creation, then we bring the resurrection to the world every time we stand against anything that would harm God's creation, that would harm other people. To make it really practical, at the heart of the corporal and spiritual works of mercy are the reverberations of the resurrection. Whenever we lift people out of poverty, whenever we provide shelter for the homeless, whenever we feed those who are hungry, give drink to those who are thirsty, visit those who are ill or are imprisoned, that is the resurrection being revealed in their life. Not the fullness of it, true, but the first fruits of it. The realization that it makes a difference in the world and transforms the world today. If you have ever been on the receiving end of that kind of graciousness, then you know the difference it makes in your moment of need. How you can go from hopelessness, from loss, from a sense of I'm near death, to actual joy and hope and being alive again. That's the power of the resurrection echoing through our world today. Resurrection is not for us just immortality or just life continuing on some future date. It is the power of the risen Christ present with us today. It is the power of God's indomitable faithfulness to us in action today. Yes, we await the fullness of resurrection when that great getting up and going home morning arises. But for now, the first fruits of that resurrection, that power that brought Christ back to life, is what we live in and what we offer the world. Ours is not just another, here's how you get to live forever. Ours is also, here's how you get to live now, in the love and grace of God that always and everywhere brings us to life.